let's move on and talk about Dataframe a bit, right? We will deal with Dataframe a lot when we get to Pandas, right? So in the subsequent videos we'll be talking about Pandas library, right? When we'll be dealing with Dataframe a lot. But just let me give you just a highlight of it, just an intuition of it, right? So over here, don't worry yourself. This is just loading a library. So we will talk about this in detail when we get to the libraries, right? When we're dealing with the libraries. What I'm doing here is that if you want to load any library, just to give you an intuition, if you want to load any library, right, use the import, right? Use import here. Then import that particular. It follows by the particular library name. So Pandas is a Python library, right? So I use the import, then followed by the library name. Okay. Then in order for me not to be writing Pandas over and over again, I just give it an alias, or I just shorten it to PD, right? So I import Pandas as PD. So this PD is just something you can maybe use NM, or you can just use O or something like that, right? Just to shorten it. But I mean, just I said, if you're giving any variable name, make sure that it makes sense to you, so that if you see it anywhere, you can actually understand what it is, right? So if I say import Pandas as PD, if I see PD, I know that it stands for Pandas. All right. So over here, I'm reading my data set. I'm going to store it in a variable called a, right? So I just this is just a variable name that you can choose. You can choose any data, any name, maybe data, right? Something like that. You can choose any name that you want. Okay. Now what I'm doing over here is that I'm using the PD. So over here, if I had not shortened it to PD, I would have written here Pandas, right? I should have written here Pandas, but I don't want to be writing all these letters Pandas, right? I don't want to be writing all this. So I just want to write PD, and I'm all good to go, right? So I use PD dot, then read underscore CSV, right? I'm using this function to actually read my data. This data is actually on my system, so I want to read it into Jupyter Notebook so that I can actually work on it. That's why I'm using read underscore CSV. Okay, and I'm using read underscore CSV. There are several read functions that we are going to talk about when we get to reading data sets from your system to either Jupyter Notebook or Google Colabs, right? So we're going to talk about that in details when we get to the subsequent videos when we are loading data sets. But just to give you an intuition before we get there. All right, so you can see over here that I'm using read underscore, right? I'm using read underscore CSV. It's because my data set is actually in a CSV format. Now, when we talk about CSV format, it's nothing but what we refer to as comma, right? It's nothing but comma, right? And then the X here is for separated, right? And then V is for values, right? So it's nothing but comma separated values, right? Comma separated values. Now, what do I mean by comma separated values? So let me show you something. Now, over here, right? If I want to show you, as I said, that this data set is on my system, right? It's on my system. Now, I want to show you what is contained in that data set. Now, let me show you over here. Now, you see how the data set is. See how the data set. This is how the data set is, right? This is how it is. Now, you see, just look at this one carefully. You can see that I have some ID here, right? In between the ID and then another data here type, we see that we have comma here. So it is, if you see the type and then the name too, if you see name and then year published, right? You see that all of them have been separated with comma, 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 right? You can spot all of them. All the data points have been separated with comma, right? All the data points have been separated with comma. So this is what we refer to as what? Comma separated values, right? All the values here have been separated with comma, right? That's why I refer to them as comma separated values. That's why I'm using read underscore CSV, right? So if it is not that, right? If it's not that, and this format is maybe we have SL as something like that, right? In SL format, then I'll use read underscore that. I'll use read underscore SL to actually read it because it's in SL format, right? But this one is in a comma separated format, so I use read underscore CSV to do that, right? We'll talk about this in detail when we are talking about how to read data set, but just to give you an intuition of how things are going to work over there. So what I want to show you over here is let me hide this, then I'll open this for you to see. Now, if I do this, right, if I run this, my data set is loaded. If I want to see, say, the first 5 rows, now this is the powerful thing about Python. You see what I showed you? That was a mess, right? That was a really a mess. You couldn't even read it. Now you see the ID that we saw. You see how the ID, now this has been, you have a column name, you have rows. So think about this as an SL where we have rows and columns, right? So this is a data frame. This is what Python will actually help us with. The help of Pandas will help us to actually have a data frame, right, in a table format, right? You can think of this as an Excel sheet, right? As an Excel sheet where we have rows, right? Where we have several rows. Where we have several rows, right? We have several rows, and then we have several columns, right? We have several rows and then several columns, right? Earlier on, when I showed you, right? When I showed you, it was quite a mess, and you cannot actually make sense of it, right? You see the ID, type, name, year, publish, they're all there. You see the data points, how they have been displayed. It's quite difficult to read, but if you use the Pandas to read it, right? If you use the Pandas to read it, it helps you to read it in this way. Now you see the ID, type, name, year, publish. You see how this has been put in a column name with the data points being displayed as nicely as that. Okay, we're going to deal with this in the Pandas class. Okay, if I want to see the shape of this, right, that's the number of rows and number of columns that we have here. I just use a.shape. Remember, I stored all these data points in just a variable called a. Right, so this a contains everything that I have here, everything. So if I want to work on anything here, I just use a. Right, so if I want to see how many rows and columns, I just use this shape, right? I just use this shape on the A. Then I can see that I have 81,312 rows with 20 columns. This is huge, right? It's a huge data set. We have 81,000. Don't forget that we are seeing only 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? It's all the way. If I want to print, maybe say the first 10, right? Let me run this again. If I want to see, say, the first 10, right? Let me hide this one so that it will not disturb you. Okay, if I want to see the first 10, if I do this, right, now you can see that I have all the way to 9, right? Now you can see how I have a lot of them here. I can do the same thing. I can see the last one, right? So I can see, instead of using the head, I can use the tail. I can use it's supposed to be small. I can use the tail, right? If I do that, so this is now you can see that I'm now at 81,302 all the way to the last 81,311, right? 311 that I have over here. Okay, so I can use it in that way. What I really want to show you is this from here. Now we'll actually be dealing with data frames, so don't worry yourself about this. We are going to actually be manipulating a lot after this class, after the Numpy class, right? And then the visualization. No, we will deal with Pandas before we go to the visualization. So after the Pandas class, everything that you're going to do will be dealing with this data frame. So don't worry yourself about this, right? We're going to work it throughout your data science life. That's what you're going to work with, right? So don't worry yourself with this. We're going to deal with it over and over again, and it will become a common thing for us. All right. Now, if I pick the type, right? So as I said, everything is stored in this A, right? So if I go to the type column, right? If I want to pick, say, the type column, and I want to see the different types of so this data set is actually consisting of different types of games. So you can see name, you can see year the game was published, right? That is the year published, the minimum players, the maximum players. We'll be dealing with this data set. I just want to show you that if you want to pick any column, right, you can do that by just using this A and then type, right? So you pick the type from that column, and then if you want to count how many if you want to count how many different types of games that we have there. So we have board game, and then we have board game expansion. So board game is having 70,820 different. I mean we have 70,820 board games, right? In the game we have 70,820 board games, and then we have 10,492 board game expansion in there. Okay, so you can use this value counter to do that, right? So this is one of the functions that we can actually use, which we will be dealing later on. Now let me show you what this I for I in this. Remember that we were dealing with that, so that's what I actually wanted to show you here when we're talking about list comprehension, right? When we're talking about list comprehension, we're dealing with this, right? So I'm going to show you when you have a data set like that, right, how you can use this I for I, this list comprehension. You can use it. Now, see what I'm doing over here. I have I for I in this column, right? If the I is equivalent to board game expansion, right? So I'm saying that go into this column, this type column, right? Now, if you go into this column, if you go through all of them, remember that earlier on we're doing this, right? We're giving a range that go into this range, and then anything that you find, just square it, right? Just square it for us. Now, I'm doing the same thing over here. It's the same intuition that I'm using. I for I in this column. So go into this column. If you find anything in there, if you find anything which is equivalent to board game expansion, print that for us. So if I do this and then I run that, you can see that it's giving us only the board game expansion, right? Remember that we have board game, right? We have board game, and then we have board game expansion in that particular column, right? In the type column, we have two different types of game in there. Now, I can also say that if you go in there and then you meet, you find a game which is called board game, right? Print it out for me. If I do that now, you can see that I've been able to print only the board game, right? So now that's what I wanted to show you with using the list comprehension on your data set, on your data frame. So after this, when we are talking about list comprehension in the next classes, it will not be new for you. Okay, so let's go all the way down. Let's go. Let me comment this because we have around 70,000 in here, which is actually quite huge. So let me comment this so that we can have space to move on to the next one. So let's talk about what is called a tuple, right? Let's talk about what is called tuple. So earlier on we were dealing with list, right? We're dealing with list. Now we can talk about tuple. Now if we talk about tuple, right, what we can actually see the difference or notice the difference between tuple and then the list is that if you see here, right, we have this smooth bracket that we're using. Right now we're using smooth bracket. If it's a list, we are going to use the square bracket, right? If this was a list, we're going to use the square bracket, but this is a tuple, right? It's a tuple, so we are using the smooth bracket, right? If you see over here, we're using smooth bracket instead of square bracket. So that's the difference that you can actually find when you're creating a tuple and then a list. Okay, now you can see that it's just the same output that we are having here, just like we're dealing with a list. Okay, now let's see if it's almost the same thing, it's giving us the same output, then why do we need a tuple? If a list is performing the same thing, why do we still need a tuple? All right, let's see how why we need that. Okay, now let's see these two. Let's see these two that we have over here. Let me give the output so that you can see. Now we have this list, right? Remember that when we're creating a list, we use this. So if you see the square bracket here, you can actually see that this is a list that we are creating. Okay, if you see the smooth bracket, you can see that it's a tuple. So I have my list items, then I have my tuple items. Okay, so if I print them, this is what I have, right? It's just the same thing, right? Cars, house, and the only thing that is different is just the, right? The only thing that is different is this thing. Now let's move down, and then we can actually spot why we need both of them, right? Why we need both of them. Now let's say I want to change this, right? Now we have cars, houses, and then workplace. That's my list items, right? That's my list items. I'll come back to my tuple items too. So first, let's deal with my list items here. So my list items, let's say we want to change the first item here, which is cars, right? Let's say we want to change it. So I'll go at index 0, right? At index 0, I will replace whatever is there with farms. So instead of cars, houses, workplace, I want to write farms, houses, workplace. Okay, now if I do that, right, you can see that now I have farms, houses, and then workplace. Instead of cars, earlier on we're having cars, houses, and workplaces. Now I have farms, houses, and then workplaces. Okay, now can I do the same thing with the tuple list? Let's see. Let's say the first item, right, at index 0, right, at index 0 I have cars there. So I want to make it food, houses, workplaces. Instead of cars, houses, workplace, I want to do food, houses, workplace. Now let's see what happens. If we do that, see what we have. We have error. Tuple object does not support item assignment. Right, so this is what we refer to as immutable, right? So you cannot change it, it's unchangeable. You cannot change for any item that you provide in the tuple, right? For any item that you provide when you're creating a tuple, the initial items that you provide when you're creating a tuple, you cannot change it. That's why we refer to tuple items as immutable, right? That means that you cannot change it. If you try to change it, then it will give you an error. Now, why is this important? If you want to create a program where the values that you provide initially should be the values that should run in the program without anyone altering the program, maybe you give it to your junior or your subordinate developer or something like that, then I mean you don't want the person to mess up with the input data that you have already provided. Then it is good to go with tuples, right? If you give a list, the person can change it at any time, right? So, or maybe, I mean, you don't want people to actually mess up with the initial data, or you yourself don't want to change the data that you have provided, then it's good to actually use tuple. But if you want to give flexibility that the initial data that you have provided, you want to change them later on, you will have the intention of changing them later on, then you go with a list. All right, so you see the two scenario. It's actually good to have both of them depending on the situation that you're working with. All right, so let's talk about list. I mean set over here. After finishing with tuple and then list, I've given you some assignment here which you can actually consider practicing when you get access to the notebook. All right, which I will load on the platform for you. Okay, let's consider a set. Right. Let's consider a set. So a set in Python is nothing but the same set that you've been dealing with in your 10th grade or in your 12th grade, right? Whatever set you've been dealing with is just the same thing that we are going to deal with over here in Python, right? So it's nothing but contains unique elements, right? It contains unique elements, and it's actually in ordered form. You cannot actually give duplicate items, right? So if you see this one, you can see that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the difference that you can actually spot here is that in this case we're using the curly bracket, right? We're using the curly bracket over here. So in list we're using the square bracket. Okay, in list we're using square brackets. List we're using square brackets, right? So that was list. And then in tuple, right? In tuple we're using the smooth bracket. Now in set, right? In set, now we are going to use the curly bracket here, right? We are going to use the curly bracket. So that's the difference that you can see, but it's how you create it inside here is almost the same thing. All right, it's almost the same thing, but I mean you need to know which one you're using, which kind of bracket you're using. If you use square, you're referring to a list. If you use smooth bracket here, you're referring to a tuple. If you use the curly bracket here, you're referring to a set. Okay, now let's move on and then see what we have over here. All right, let's say we have this set, right, which contains 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 1. Now what we have here is that we have some duplicate items here. We have 1, then we have another 1. We have 5, right, then we have 5 here. So we have duplicate items here. If we try to run this, see what happens. It takes out all the duplicate items. That's the good item and thing about set over here, right? It takes care of all the duplicate items and make you get unique items. Okay, so if you intend to have unique items in your set, I mean in your list of, I mean in your display of items or data points, then it's advisable to go with set. Okay, to go with set. Now, remember in tuple, we're not able to actually do index assignments like this, right? And in list, we're able to do that. What about in set, right? If we try to run this, we get an error. So in set 2, we cannot actually do that. So you see the error that is given here. Set object does not support item assignment. So if you run a program and you see an error like this, don't get freaked out, don't get shaken. Just read the error. It actually give you it's going to actually tell you what you're supposed to do, right? It's actually going to tell you what you're supposed to do. So you can see here set object does not support item assignment. It's just as clear as that. So even in Python, the error debugging is quite easier, right, compared to the other programs, right? It's actually telling you what you're supposed to do, and it will point to where the error is actually happening. So if you have different several lines of code, right? So this is just one cell. So maybe I have other code being written all the way down here. It will actually point to the particular code where the error is coming from, right? So you see this arrow, it will point to the particular line of code where the error is actually coming from. And sometimes it can also go all the way. Maybe if you're not supposed to include equal sign here, right? If we're not supposed to include equal sign here, you could have actually pointed, it could have show you an arrow here to show you that this is where the error is coming from, and you were not supposed to add equal sign or something like that. So it's just an example that I'm giving you, but you might be encountering an error which gives you something like that, so you get to know that, oh, I need to go take a look at what I did over here. Maybe you left some semicolon, or maybe you left some comma or something like that, or maybe you added a comma or semicolon here that you're not supposed to actually add. Then Python will point to it that the error is actually coming from here, right? And to give you an explanation of what is actually happening over there. So if you get to the error, just take your time, read the error, and then know what you're supposed to do. If you're not sure, just copy this error and then paste it in Google. You actually find a lot of answers in there. Okay, people have been encountering that error, trust me, a lot before you. So obviously there's a solution for that. Okay, so if you're not familiar with how you will deal with that error, just copy the same error, right? Just copy the same error, and then let me just do this one so that you get to see. Just copy the same error, go to Google, paste it there, right? Go to Google, you see that type error, set object does not support at time. So some people have already experienced this kind of problem before you, right? So you can easily click on any of them, and then you got to know how they were able to solve it. Okay, now moving on to what we were doing over here. Okay, now we cannot actually do this index assignment, but what we can do to work our way around this is to use this function, the add function, right? So in set we can use the add function. So don't forget, this is our set, right? My set one is our set that we created, right? Which contains this, so which contains actually this, right? So if we want to add the 7 to it, instead of doing this index assignment, we can use the add, and then we do that. Now if we do that, let me do this so that we can actually run it, right? So let me run this. Okay, then I'll come here, then I'll run it. It gets rid of that, then I run it. Now you see that 7 is now there. Earlier on we were having 1 2 3 4 5 5 1, right? Now we have 1 2 3 4 5 7, right? Don't forget the duplicate values will not come. So we've been able to add this 7. You can also use this. You can also use the update function to actually update it. So if you're actually adding a single element, right? If you're adding if you want to add a single element, then you use the add. But if you want to add multiple elements, right, you use the update function. Use the update function if you want to add multiple elements, right? You use the update function. Okay. Okay, so now let's move on to performing some operations on the set that we have over here. So let me get rid of this. Let's perform some operations that we have over here. Okay, so there are several operations just like we were doing in your 10th grade or in your 12th grade, right? You perform some operations on set. So in the same way we can do in Python also, right? In the same way we can do. So we have two different sets over here. We have set A and then we have set B, right? Set A contains 1 3 8 5 9 10 items, and then set B also contains these items 2 4 6 7 9 and then 10, right? And then both set A and then set B are all containing 9 and then 10, right? So this is what is common to them. This is their intersection. This is what A contains that B does not contain, right? And then this is let me use my pen so that you get to actually understand this. Let me go here and then change it. Okay, so this set contains these items, right? Which this item is not, this does not have it. So this is unique to this set A, and these items are also unique to this set B, right? These items are unique to set B, and this 9 and 10 is what is unique. I mean, which is common among this A and then B. That's their intersection. Okay, now let's see the operations that we can perform over here. Right, let's see some of the operations that we can perform over here. So it's the same thing that I'm creating here, right? So set A contains 1 3 8 5 9 and then 10. So that's what you have here, 1 3 5 8 9 10. And then set B contains 2 4 6 7 9 and then 10. That's what you have over here, 2 4 6 7 8 9 and then 10, right? So that's what you have over here. Now, what we can do is that we can perform a union of A and B, that is putting A and B together, right? So that's going to be everything here, right? So the union of A and B is nothing but all these, right? So all these put together, right? But don't forget that we are dealing with set, so if there's any duplicate, it's not actually going to happen, right? So set A contains 9, and then set B also contains 9, right? So those duplicates are going to be removed and only one of them is going to happen. So if I should use this one to show you, let me actually open this one, right? Set A contains this 9, set B also contains this 9, so 9 will be picked once, right? Set A contains 10, set B contains 10, 10 will be picked once, no duplicate over here. So what we're using is that we're using this pipe to do that. So A, and then you use this pipe. This pipe symbol is actually normally above your enter, the enter key, right? The enter key, that is the backslash. It's on the same key as the backslash, right? So if you see on your keyboard, on your laptop, or on your laptop or desktop, whatever keyboard that you're using, the key that is, I mean, if you see your backslash or the key which is above your enter, the enter key, you can see that we have this pipe. So use shift and then that's that key, you can actually get this. Okay, now there's another way, there's an alternative way to do this, right? So instead of maybe using a pipe, you can also use the union function. So a dot union b will actually give you the same thing, right? Will actually give you the same thing. Now if you want to see the intersection, you can also use A and B, right? You can print it that way, and then you can see that what is common in between A and B is just 9 and 10, just like we're having it here, 9 and then 10. Okay, so you can see that we have it here, and there's an alternative way that you can do that. You can use the intersection function to also do that. Okay, you can use the intersection function to also get the same output. What about set difference, right? That is elements only in A and not in B. So if you see the graphical here, we have 1, 3, 8, and then 5. These are the items that are only in A and not in B, right? So if you want to find that, what we can do is that we can do A dash B, right? And that will give us 1, 3, 5, and 8, right? 1, 3, 5, 1, 3, 5, and 8. Okay, that's what it does. Those are the items that are in A and not in B, right? Those are the items. Alternatively, we can use A dot difference. So we can use the difference function to do the same thing. Okay, we can use the difference function to do the same thing. We can also perform the symmetric difference. It's nothing but elements in both A and B without the intersection. So that is this, right? That is in that case, the symmetric difference is nothing but this. That is this plus that, right? So we want to add this and that, right? Without this, so we don't want to consider this. So that's the symmetric difference that we can actually find over here, right? So that's what is actually going to happen, right? That's elements in both A and B without the intersection, right? That's what you can. So you can use this symbol, which is normally on the 6 key, right? So you use shift and then you press the 6. You can actually find it over there, right? You can see that the intersection, which is 9 and 10, is not part of it. Okay, you can check other Python set method, right? So we've been using some of them, right? We've been using the difference, we've been using the intersection, the union. You can check in some of them, right? If you see the Python set documentation, you can see a lot of them, and then you can practice along. Now let's go to the one of the most important things that you're going to encounter throughout your data science journey, right? So dictionary is something that we're going to encounter over and over again, right? So it's important we take note of it, right? So all these are things that we'll be encountering. That's why I want to introduce you to them, so that as soon as we encounter them, we will not actually fumble. We will actually get to know. So let me see if I can have an example here to show you. So this is one of the projects that you'll be doing, moving on, right? So this Amazon data set that you'll be doing, right? That you'll be predicting whether they should grant access to their employers regarding some of the resources or not. So we're using machine learning to do this. Now let me show you where we use dictionary, right? So I want to let you know that there's an importance, associated with it, right? So you need to take a good note of it. Now over here you can see that this is a dictionary. This is a dictionary that I'm creating. Let me just give you a little bit intuition before I come back to that, so that you know what I was doing over there. Over here, if you want to create a dictionary, right, what a dictionary does is that it has a key and then a value, right? It has a key and then a value. Now let me open this over here. What I mean by a key and a value is that if you see this, right, we have name here. This is what we refer to as the key. You see that we have Ashutosh, right? So this is the value, right? You see that we have another key, which is age, right? Which is age. And then we have the value for it, right? Which is the value, right? So and the name is Ashutosh, right? So the name is key. The Ashutosh here becomes the value, okay? And then you see that the profession here is also a key, right? With the value, which is the data science, right? That becomes the value. So it's always having key, value, key, value, key, value, right? That's how we create it. And you see that we are using the curly bracket as we're using insert, right? As we're using insert. We use that to create a dictionary. Okay, we use that to create a dictionary. So that's how you need to take note of how we create a dictionary, right? Take note of how we create a dictionary, having keys and then values, right? With the curly bracket. Okay, with the curly brackets in there. Okay, so now if we print it, you see that we have our dictionary here. We have our dictionary here, right? So just like the example that I was showing you earlier on, right? The example that I was showing you in with regards to the projects, right? This one, right? So over here you can see that we have a key, we have a value, right? We have a key, we have a value, we have a key, we have a value, we have a key, we have a value, right? We have a value, and then you can see that we have our curly bracket in there, right, to cover them up. Okay, so this is a dictionary, and you're going to be needing them, right? You're going to be needing them as we progress in the course. You're going to be needing them. This is just one of the projects that I'm showing, but in couple of the projects that we'll be doing, right, in the real world or whatever you go and take your career to, you'll be dealing with dictionary over and over again. Okay, so I mean, just take note of it. Just take note of it. Let's go all the way down to what we're doing over here. All right, so if you want to know more about dictionaries, I've given a link here, right, that you can actually take advantage of. Now let's see what we have over here. Let's see what we have over here. Now in this case, right, I have let me bring my pen so that I can write for you to actually see. Okay, now I have my curly bracket here. I have my curly bracket here. Now see what is happening here. I have my key, right? Now see the value that I have. The value is now a list, right? Now you see how we are putting the things together, right? You see how the things are coming back together, right? Now we have a list. Now we're combining a list with a key, right? So this is a dictionary we are creating. Dictionary which contains a list, right? Now we have a age here, which becomes the key. Right, and then the whole of this, right, this list becomes the value. Okay, now what we're going to do is that this actually makes, I mean, it's the readability of this is quite low. I mean, it's difficult to read and make sense out of it. Just like this, we have name, Ashutosh. But if I did not tell you that we have name, Ashutosh, age, and then the age is this, profession, and the profession is this, it's quite difficult to just figure out, just spotting it like that, right? So what we can do is to convert to a data frame, right? Remember earlier on we talked about a data frame, right? We talked about a data frame, which is nothing but having rows and then columns, right? Having rows and then columns, just like in Excel that we have rows, we have several rows, and then we'll be having several columns, right? So just think of it as a table form, right? As a table form which contains several rows, right? And then several columns. So that's a data frame. So if you put it in a data frame, it becomes quite readable, right? It becomes quite readable. So now over here, for us to be able to convert it into a data frame, this is what we are actually doing over here, right? So we created our data, right? We created this, which contains the key and then the values, right? It contains the key and then the values. Now we are converting it into a data frame using this data frame, right? Dot from dictionary, right? From dictionary to a data frame, right? So we're using this data frame function, and in that we have from dictionary there, right? And then don't forget this is our the variable that contains our dictionary, right? So we make this operation on that so that we'll be able to put the same thing. So the same thing that we have here, the same thing that we have here is the same thing we've been able to actually put in this format. Okay, now you see that this one is readable. Now you see, if I see a name here, I see age here, I can see that James is 30 years, Khan is 14 years, Ramesh is 22 years, Ike is 44. It's quite readable. Instead of this seeing that, okay, I have this James who is James who is 30 years, Khan who is 14 years, Ramesh who is 22 years, Ike who is 44 years. It's quite difficult to read it in this way, but if I put it in a data frame like this, it's quite readable. Okay, so that's what Pandas will actually let us do, and we will talk about Pandas in the following classes. Okay, so don't forget I'm using PD. Remember earlier on we talked about important library called Pandas, and we shortened it to PD. So I'm using that over here. All right.